After World War II, a baby boom changed America and how its citizens, especially young people, engaged with their community and their government. Now, another population surge, the millennial generation, is poised to create changes of its own. What does that mean for our communities and our democracy? Join us now from Connecticut's Old State House for a town hall meeting. Rules of Engagement, Boomers versus Millennials. We'll explore how the skills and strategies of two generations might combine with each other and with new technologies to improve Connecticut's civic health. In partnership with CTN, the Connecticut Network, Connecticut's Old State House, the Office of the Secretary of the State of Connecticut, United Way of Central and Northeastern Connecticut, Everyday Democracy, the Metro Hartford Alliance, Hartford Young Professionals and Entrepreneurs, and the Connecticut Youth Forum, with funding provided by Connecticut Humanities. Now, here's your host, Diane Smith.
And thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you with us. We're at the Old State House, this beautiful building where the state capitol was for many years and where government took place. It seems like a very appropriate place to have a conversation about civic engagement. And we've decided that we need to really talk about civic engagement from 2 points of view, the two biggest generational cohorts, the boomers and the millennials. And I'll ask you a question. I'm going to describe, we sent out a survey. And we asked people to describe their generation, to describe some of the things that meant the most to them or were turning points in their lives. So, who said creative, tech-savvy, these are people describing themselves, entitled, diverse, self-obsessed, innovative? Anybody want to take a guess? Those are the millennials. Was it a millennial who said that or a boomer? Okay. Gen X said skeptical, cynical, thoughtful, apathetic, hardworking, and often ignored. And in fact, tonight, they kind of are. And then finally, the boomers, who describe themselves as creative, can-do, optimistic people, change agents, and also very hardworking. So we're going to start working hard in just a couple of minutes. We're going to have a conversation with all the people in this room. But first, we want to explain to you what we mean by civic engagement. And to do that, we'll talk to our Secretary of the State, Denise Merrill. Madam Secretary.
Thank you very much, Diane, and thank you all for being here tonight, and happy holidays to all. Happy third night of Hanukkah for anybody celebrating. And thank you to Diane for organizing this forum on a very important topic. And it's part of a series of conversations we're having as a way to engage our citizens in dialogue. If we talk to each other about the issues we face, it brings people together, connecting us with our neighbors, family, and friends. We have come to call it how we measure the civic health of a community. No, not the physical health, the civic health. These conversations are an outgrowth of our Civic Health Initiative, which we launched a few years ago. We took a survey of the state of Connecticut with Everyday Democracy and the National Conference on Citizenship. And these surveys were going on all over the country. We were one state that was part of this project. And we often hear that people's participation in civic life is dwindling. People are less likely to vote, less likely to join local boards and commissions and associations, and less likely to exhibit social behaviors generally. So we wanted to see if we could measure this idea. And more importantly, if people don't feel connected to these things that we traditionally think of as civic engagement, where do they feel connected? They must be connecting somewhere. And even more importantly, why? Why is this changing, and where is it going? We found some very interesting statistics. Some of them led us here tonight. So I'll give you a few that came from our Connecticut Civic Health Index. While the survey showed not many people worked with neighbors on community problems, I think it was just like 8% of people reported that. But they are connected through media sources other than personal knowledge of each other. You can imagine social media, Facebook and all kinds of different ways we are now connecting. A vast majority of Connecticut residents are connected to the internet, 87%. That's a big number, even nationally. Young, old, rich, and poor, almost everyone is online now. Nearly 60% of residents still read a daily paper, though, which is quite interesting. We're a very well-informed state. And while some of us feel connected to our community or government through voting, and that's sort of my bailiwick, but I can tell you that number is dropping. We also found that those who register and vote in smaller numbers, namely minority populations, white populations with less income or education, are apt to be more active and connected to other things, like their house of worship and their children's schools. The question of how we can get more people involved in the public life of their communities is a very difficult one. But one powerful lesson came through, and of all the things we learned, it's the one that sticks in my mind the most. Because if people do get involved, it's because someone asked them. And that's a very simple but powerful idea. A lot of times, people like myself even, first time I ran for office, I didn't think it up on my own. Somebody said, gee, you'd be really good on the Board of Education. And I said, really? I just never had thought of doing that. But that just goes to show you that sometimes I think people need to be asked in. So, as a result of this survey and some other things we learned, we decided to host a series of community forums like this one tonight, where we could come together as a city or town or state and discuss important questions. We've had a series of them on very important topics such as mental health. We had one on mental health, we had one on education, and tonight we're discussing millennials versus boomers. And it's a favorite topic of mine because I have to say it, I am in one of those categories. I'll let you guess which one. And you've heard many complaints from boomers like me. This generation of young people coming of age in the new millennium is just not civically inclined or engaged. They're apathetic. They just don't care enough or pay attention enough to what's happening in their communities to vote and do those sorts of civic activities. And in my generation, it's often heard, when we were in our 20s and 30s, we were very active. We stood up for things, civil rights, anti-Vietnam War. In fact, I can remember being part of a group that fought to get the right to vote for 18-year-olds, for example. We were engaged in the leading issues of the day, and we took to the streets and made things happen. And yes, we voted in big numbers and continue to do so. But this generation of millennials, I don't know. You look at voter participation numbers, the boomer generation is much more active. But, you know, after doing this survey and a number of projects I've worked on, I'm beginning to wonder if we aren't missing something. For example, the presidential elections, 2008 and 2012, brought out huge numbers of voters between the ages of 18 and 29. Young people have so much more information at their fingertips than we ever did. And I think they're a lot smarter than we are, frankly. But is all that information, what are they doing with all that information? Does it make you complacent? Or does the ability to take video, spread it with the world, organize flash mob protests through Facebook and Twitter actually show an empowerment that we in my generation were never able to capitalize on? So that's just a couple of questions that I think we'll be asking and talking about tonight. I'm sure it'll lead to an interesting discussion, and I look forward to it. And I hope it's a springboard to other topics and ways we can increase civic engagement among all generations. And we have many things to learn from each other. So let me stop here and go back to Diane. And thank you very much, all of you, for being here tonight. Thanks.
And thank you, Madam Secretary. So let me introduce our first panel. We're going to have two panels tonight, and they're going to be made up of 50% boomers and 50% millennials. To my immediate left on the end here is Bruce Cluett. Bruce has a PhD in history from UConn. He is active in history and preservation in Connecticut and is the author of several books. Sitting next to him is TJ Clinch. TJ has a business called Civic Mind Studios. A couple of things that he's done include opening a yoga studio and also a very interesting idea about a cycling studio that captures energy and delivers it back to the grid. I love that. And some of you have probably heard of Hartford Hodgepodge. That's also one of TJ's things. So TJ, thank you so much for being here tonight. Sitting next to TJ is AJ. That's how we planned it. What can I say? Ashley Johnson. And Ashley Johnson is known for a number of things, but one of the things he's known for is an organization he started called Small Business Night Out. He's also been Named one of the 40 under 40 by Hartford Business Journal. He is a pastor, a community educator, and as a pastor assists people in developing spiritually and economically, works with people who have mental health and substance abuse problems. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of that. Thank you. And finally, Susan Campbell. Hello, Susan. Susan is now with the Partnership for Strong Communities. Susan is an author. She is a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, or she was a columnist at the Hartford Courant for 25 years, and currently she is the Robert C. Vance Endowed Chair in Journalism and Mass Communications at CCSU. Thank you very much. And I should say that, I'll start with you, Susan. You said that as one of the very youngest boomers, you're rather... She did. She tried to sneak in as a millennial, but we carded her on the way in.
I did.
You said that you're kind of intimidated by some of the baby boom generation. Why is that, and how?
I think because I grew up reading everything, Time and Newsweek, and is that my voice? Sorry. And yes, I wish I was a millennial. There are many things I would do over, but as a younger boomer, I made it by 5 years. I saw people, older people in my generation, go out and make quite a lot of change, but I have to say that some of the change that we take credit for, we shouldn't. We didn't do that, really. Not all of us went to Woodstock. It would have been far too crowded in the field. But as I was growing up, coming in on the tail end of this, I thought, what is there left to conquer? Because they ended the war, now what? So yeah, I grew up a little bit intimidated by the legacy.
We have found a few other things to work on, and we'll talk about some of the things you're working on. In fact, something that you're trying to help end, which is homelessness in Connecticut. Bruce, you're the historian. I wanted to let you sort of set the table. Tell us who the baby boomers are and how they impacted Connecticut, and then we'll move on to the millennials.
Well, I think at its most basic level, the baby boom is a demographic fact. Births had declined prior to World War II because of the Great Depression. People were putting off getting married. They were putting off having children for economic reasons. With World War II, a large portion of the male half of the population was otherwise engaged. And so after the war, there was a, shall we say, pent-up demand for young people to get married, start their families, and
for something else, I guess.
Yeah, it was pretty substantial. The population of Connecticut as a whole, from 1940 to 1960, increased by about 50%, from 1.7 million to about 3 million. Well, let me consult my notes, though. I'm not great on statistics. Yeah, so 1.7 million to 2.5 million people. So it was a substantial demographic event. But there were other things that made the concept of the baby boom even realer than it might otherwise have been. First of all, it was largely a suburban phenomenon. The population of Hartford stagnated in that interval I just mentioned, 1940 to 1960. But the population of just the west side suburbs increased by more than 100%. So at the same time you have this demographic event, it is a suburban event. Also, it's a media-influenced event in that building on what radio had accomplished in establishing a national sort of reference point, media-driven reference point, television. And of course, you had just 3 networks, so you didn't have a lot of choice. People were all watching the same programs, and those programs were modeling suburban life, family life, Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, on and on and on. Lastly, I would just mention that in addition to it being a suburban event and a media-driven event, I feel as a historian, I have to caution us about these categories. I've heard the baby boom defined as 1964 to, 1946 to 1964. Well, that's quite a range. Somebody born in 1964 may or may not have something in common with someone born in 1946. All the people who were born in 1946 weren't completely identical. So we as human beings, we have to think in terms of abstractions and generalizations. So it's useful to have the concept of the baby boom.
And actually, Bruce, the millennial generation, depending on what reference you look at, it has a pretty wide span.
Right, they all do.
Yep.
And I'm not trying to discourage us from using these terms because there is some reality there, but we always have to keep in the back of our mind, oh, there's diversity in there, it's a generalization, it's an artificial construct.
And there isn't even really an understanding of what the years are for millennials, so we'll talk about that too. But generally it's considered that people who kind of became young adults around 2000 are millennials. Some people say it's people born from 1981 on, some people say it's 1977 to 1995, so you know, you sort of get the drift. TJ, I saw you looking at Bruce as he was describing things like only 3 networks to watch, everybody watched the same show, and you look like, really?
Yeah, growing up, television was a big deal, you know, through the 90s, but actually now I don't really watch TV at all, and if I do, it's Netflix. So really absorbing media in smaller bites than these large format, you know, things. The largest format stuff I'll watch is probably Jon Stewart. You know, that's the largest piece of media I'll consume. So I was actually thinking about how he's describing the range, because how do you define a millennial even? Mm-hmm. For me, I think of a millennial as a state of mind even, more than an actual, you know, birthday. I think, you know, to Susan's point, we connect on a lot of things, just in talking beforehand. So her way of thinking is very much in tune to millennials just as much as mine.
Mm-hmm. AJ, tell us a little bit about some of the things that Bruce was saying. He was talking about the whole suburban phenomenon, and yet a lot of millennials are looking to move back into the cities. In fact, we're sort of hoping that you're going to help us save Hartford.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks a lot. 2015 is coming. So a lot of the young people want to come back to a vibrant city. You know, if we look at some of the major cities in our country, young people like to have things to do, and especially millennials. Sitting at home with your pet dog, or, you know, sitting at home with your cat isn't good enough. So young folks want some things to do. So they're moving out of suburban areas and coming in to more urban areas because of the lifestyle, the attraction. You know, young people aren't really ready to settle down. I just got married, so well, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You know, because I didn't want to die alone, so I just had in my 1-bedroom apartment, right? So, but you know, the older I get, the more and more I start to see how life changes. My father, which I consider myself a millennial boomer because my dad had me at a very late age. He had me when he was approximately 55 years old. My father died at 84 last year. So me and my dad were on 2 different spectrums of the world. You know, he never understood anything I did, and I definitely didn't understand what he did. But when it came to calming down, I listened to some of the things my father used to say. You can't go out and club all night, son. You got to work sometime. So us as millennials have to find a balance with the boomers. So we have to find a way to make our city attractive, or our cities attractive to people like me and people like-minded like me to come together and see exactly what it is where we can come together. It might be a baseball game, it might be a football game, it might be a discussion like this. So we have to find a way to make our city more attractive by having discussions like this.
Susan, we already revealed that you're a boomer. But as the Vance Chair teaching communications and journalism at CCSU, you're dealing with millennials. What do you think are the 2 biggest stereotypes that the 2 groups have about each other?
I think millennials look at boomers as, why don't you shut up? And case in point. I think the millennials I deal with, including my own sons, I think they look at this particular generation as being entitled. Here, Sonny, let me tell you how to do this. But I looked at my parents' generation the same way. I can't speak for all boomers, but I think there is a misperception about the activism exhibited by millennials, it has not been my experience at all that millennials are sitting back. And I think some boomers may also look to millennials as they need a little more seasoning, but that again, I think that's a generational thing. We all like to think we're the best, the best that America has to offer. We're probably not.
It's interesting that you said that, because somebody commented in a survey that baby boomers think that experience and expertise really counts, as well as skills and knowledge, and millennials think that skills and knowledge make up for expertise and experience, and that you can achieve without the experience. So that's kind of how we're looking at each other across the fence, which is not always so friendly. But I want to have Tim Herbst join me, if you wouldn't mind standing up for a minute. Here is somebody who got civically engaged at a very early age, probably way earlier than I'm even going to quote. But at the age of 19, you first ran for office in Trumbull. You're the first selectman of Trumbull now.
Correct.
And you ran for planning and zoning?
Planning and zoning, 1999.
So what motivates a 19-year-old to want to be on the P&Z board?
I'm still asking myself that question. No, I've been blessed to, grow up in a family that values public service and giving back to the community. And when I ran for planning and zoning, I did not expect to win. And 10 years later, when they asked me to run for first selectman, I didn't expect to win either. And the rest is history. But I find it rewarding, to give back to a community that you were born in, raised in, went to school in. So it's been incredibly rewarding.
So you not only, I should say, you're not only the first selectman, but you just this year ran for statewide office too, and that was a whole other challenge. But at also a rather still tender age, I can say that, Jim, right? Yeah, at our age, yeah. You ran for statewide office, and you feel that those offices are going to start turning over, that a new generation is going to start taking those over, maybe in the next 4 years.
I think when you look at what happened in the country 6 years ago, I think we're going to have that same type of generational shift here in Connecticut over the next 4 years. You're going to see a lot more millennials, just by virtue of the fact that millennials will be getting older, starting to jump into the political arena, running for statewide office. This year I was the only, I think, 30-year-old running for a statewide office. I think you're going to see a lot more of that in the next 4 years.
Are the millennials ready to step up?
I think they are. I think we have to. You look at some of the people that are getting involved in politics that are in their 20s. Mayor Aaron Stewart in New Britain. We just elected Andre Baumgartner, a state rep, 19 years old, 20 years old. So I think you're starting to see the bench starting to develop. And I think over the course of the next 4-6 years, you're going to see a lot of generational change in terms of the leadership in our state.
Now, I figure that a 19-year-old doesn't get involved in politics unless he's had some coaching at home about civic engagement. I want to have these folks stand up right here. I promised your dad that I'd let him comment after you commented, so here's Mom and Dad. He's been warned? Oh, okay. Really, when he was 19 years old and he said he's going to run for planning and zoning, what did you think? And what was it that you did in your family that might have led to that?
I thought he was going to win, because in 5th grade, he said he was going to run for student council, and he did. He won. And then in high school, class president for 4 years, and he won. So he believes in himself, and he was raised in an environment that is civic-minded.
Mm-hmm. And you're a former teacher.
Yes.
So you really, I guess, have tried to bring civic engagement into the classroom, too.
Absolutely. One of the things I've always told people is that I didn't grow up in the 50s and 60s. I was raised. I was raised to say thank you, please, no sir, yes sir, excuse me when it's needed, to help people in need, to love people for who they are and not what you'll get out of them, and then also to respect other people the way that you want to be respected.
Deborah, I'm going to ask you to step over here just for a second so I don't have to lean too much. Now, Deborah, I should say, is not only Tim's mom, but she's also the chairman or the president of the Board of Education.
Chairman of the Trumbull Board of Education, yes.
So, when you two are having dinner together and the Board of Education, the education budget for the town comes up, what generally happens?
Well, it's very interesting. Him being the first selectman and me being the chairman, a lot of people think, well, he influences her, when in fact, Tim knows that education is my area, and he lets me do as I please. And we have, if he tries to come over into my territory, I said, okay, I'm the chairman of the Board of Education. I hear you. But he's really let me just be myself, and it's worked out beautifully. When we talk about millennials, maybe not stepping up, it's not my experience either. I've seen Tim grow up, and he's been part of many groups. He came from a baby boomer environment where, family, church, school, we pushed all of those things, but also to give back, to volunteer, and to remember those that were less fortunate, and it stayed with him. So that being said, I think that when we do these things, we set an example, but he was an example to me of a young person that wanted to do, and there are many, many more. As he was traveling, campaigning in the state.
Okay, I have to interrupt you here for a minute because I did hear this rumor that the two of you are Democrats, and he's a Republican.
No, we are registered Republicans.
Now.
I have. I'm going to be very honest with you. I have always voted Republican, and the only time I voted Democrat was for Jimmy Carter. And the reason I voted for Jimmy Carter in those days was because I liked Walter Mondale. And I was so young and
foolish.
I guess foolish, but I learned. And as, as life evolved, I saw that my values were more aligned with the Republican Party.
So that Democrat-Republican rumor, that was just a dirty...
Just a
dirty trick they were trying to get to, unseat your campaign. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. Of course, one of the things, AJ, that we've talked about over the years is that some of the big movements that boomers were involved with, civil rights movement and others, sort of emanated in part from church background. Mm-hmm. A lot of coalitions started in the churches, and people went on marches. They got on buses at their churches. They heard about it in their churches. How is it today?
Well, the movement has kind of fallen off. It's kind of fallen off. But the recent issues that we've had, I can really say that millennials are more interested now than ever. When we talk about Ferguson, when we talk about New York, when we talk about North Carolina, the millennials now are reaching back in to the churches. Movements are now, I mean, just in my church personally, I've seen more young people come interested in the movement. What can we do to help? What can we do? And the church has always been the starting point for movements. I see a bunch of bishops and ministers and elders in here. The church has always been a place where the movement started. Dr. King started in the church. A lot of great people started in the church, and now I'm really starting to see that push is happening now. My father would say, the movement is dead. Y'all don't want to do nothing. Y'all don't want to go out in the street anymore. We got y'all the right to vote. Y'all don't even vote. We got y'all to get jobs, and y'all want to get jobs. Y'all don't do nothing. Shh. Thank you. No, but I'm starting to see now that a lot more people my age are getting interested in not only coming to church to change their lives, but churches are having more of an agenda to get the young people in activism and movements.
Bishop Selders, I'd like to ask you, because you have been an activist in our community for a long time. You were involved in the civil rights movement. You're a religious leader. You're also well known as a songwriter, as a singer. You've traveled all over the country and I suppose other places as well. What do you see in terms of millennials coming to church and in terms of movements starting out of church? Does church still have that same resonance for people?
Well, no. I think what is happening, and Pastor AJ is correct, there is a stirring that's begun now. Ferguson has lit a fire, not only in this country, but across the world. And the leadership that is emerging, they're irreverent. The church has been largely not concerned with the suffering of urban America. And let me be very specific, black church. Urban church, we've been a little, there has been for some time a disconnect. And now that this has emerged, there is the proverbial passing of the torch, or what I would say now, They haven't waited around for leadership, the classic civil rights leadership to say, hey, this is how you do it, sonny or daughter. They are taking the baton. They are leading. They're moving in ways that are very different. Social media. We've had Arab Spring. I mean, there's a new way of organizing. There's a new way of doing it now. And so for those of us who have been on the ground, I'm like, go. How can I be a support? How can I get in the way to help? And if I am in the way, call me, and I'll move to the side because we need your energy. Now, what happens is they're glad for some of us grayer hairs.
Please don't point to Susan. That really.
I promised her I would heckle her just a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair.
They are very respectful. I was on the ground a week or two ago in Ferguson, and young people there were like, Bishop, thank you for being here. And we were in long conversations about my experience and my wife's experience as we've lived our lives, as we've done activism. So there is a connection that they are making from our histories and our stories. And I think it's incumbent upon us who are boomers now to gift that to millennials. To say, listen, we do have some information, we do have some resource, and how can we partner together? I need your energy because I'm sucking wind. It's 2:30 and I need a break. I need some coffee. and yet they need some of what we know and some of what we've understood and some of what we have lived through as our lived experience to provide community health and wealth. I think we've got our jobs cut out for us because this time now is so much bubbling and it's moving so fast. And my concern is, can we keep pace with one another? Yeah.
That's an interesting question. Thank you, Bishop. Is Jason Teal here, the head of the NAACP, and Meriden didn't make it. What I wanted to talk to him about was that something that you said, that it used to be that churches would provide some of the impetus, the NAACP would provide some of the impetus, Urban League, and yet what you said is that organizing doesn't necessarily need those things anymore. So then how do you keep those organizations relevant, or are they?
Well, some would say they're not relevant any longer. And they have for a while searched for and kind of floundered around trying to find what is relevant. And I think some organizations, change is not all bad. and that today we need something else. And maybe what is emerging may have just as much value as what has existed. We don't come here alone. We don't come here in a vacuum or in isolation. So we learn from each other. But protesting and marching of the 1950s and 60s is very different to hands up, don't shoot right now. That's a different energy. There's a different impetus for movement now. And that's okay. I hope we can hear young people and not be in the way of young people. And that's my problem, or that's my issue now. I think some of the classic civil rights organizations, let me be very clear, and I'm dancing on something here now, and I know it, but I want to be honest, may have lived their lives and have worked now in a vacuum that may not be as relevant as once was. And that's okay. Let's find ways to be relevant, but in new ways and not the same old, because it's not the same anymore.
Interesting that you said that because some millennials have sort of rejected the institutions that a lot of people have believed in over the years, or some of them have gone inside and tried to change them. You're waving your hands at me.
Yeah, I gotta add something here, and I promise you we can move on.
It's okay.
So the thing I want to add here is I feel, and Bishop, I respect you. I respect you a lot. But I feel like the boomers haven't done a great job passing the torch. And it's not just in the church. It's not just in it's in the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. Everybody's suffering right now. And the best way I heard it is at an NAACP meeting, a guy got up and said, "You all want the NAACP to work for you all, but the problem is you haven't fed the dog that fought for you." And it seems like all these organizations, the Democrats are struggling, the NAACP is struggling, every organization is struggling because we haven't fed the dog that has fought for us. Millennials aren't involved, half of the boomers are just still hanging around, holding the power. So we've got to figure out, the boomers have to figure out how to hand the torch a little earlier before we get disinterested. Simple as that.
It's interesting that you said that, because as I was starting to say about going into organizations that already exist, and some millennials say not relevant. Brian Cofrancesco, who happens to work here at the Old State House, is the youngest president ever of his Kiwanis Club, which is the chapter in Meriden. What was the reaction when you first joined the club, and how did you get elected the president? I'm guessing that you're not only the youngest president, but one of the youngest members.
I am. Our average age has come down a little bit. I've been involved with Kiwanis for the past 10 or 12 years, and so I was looking to be involved with it, and so there was definitely some mixed reactions. It's always that difference between approaches, and that's one thing I've noticed is millennials and boomers are often after the same thing, but sometimes it's how we approach things that's often different. And that's one thing I've realized is for us, as with many boomers, we're getting involved with organizations because we see those grassroots ways as the way to make change. And there are certainly those who are running for office, and some of us, though, see better chances by getting involved locally and finding our own ways to make a difference.
You did say, though, that there was some pushback when you came into the organization, and that's something that a lot of people said in their surveys that we sent out, which is that millennials, when they try to get involved, get pushback from boomers.
A little, and I think it's part of those stereotypes. Like you asked Susan those questions about what are the stereotypes of the millennials, and I think it's a blanket statement that many feel that the millennials are apathetic and they're not dedicated and they're not motivated, when many of us really are. And it's just those perceptions we have of each other that often cause those reactions. And that's what I faced. Just a lot of people thinking, well, what are your approaches? Are you really going to be that into it? And we really want to make a difference.
By the way, if anybody wants to raise a hand and be included in the conversation, don't wait for me to come to you. We have somebody right over there. We're going to have Rebecca bring you a microphone.
Got it? Good? You want to hold that for me, just in case I talk too long? Hi, Diane. I'm Richard Sugarman from the Connecticut Forum. So I just wanted to comment. Let me just move back so I can. This idea of institutions, and I think the comment was that institutions have sort of let us down, and I actually think institutions have left all of us down. I think that's one of the key issues here, is that, you know, we used to be able to, as boomers and in years past, we used to be able to really depend on all sorts of institutions, newspapers, businesses, politics, sports, education, religion, it goes on and on. There have been enormous either declines or disappointments in so many institutions. It's hard to think of some that have not declined. So I think one of the real differences is that as boomers, we still have this sort of core sense of belief and hope that those institutions will both bring the authority that they once brought and the definition to life that they once brought. Millennials have never had that experience and haven't had that belief and don't have that sense of, I would contend, trust in institutions, hope for institutions, or sense that institutions are really the answer. To me, the optimistic part about that is that they see the answer more in themselves as opposed to externally in institutions. I think that's just a key difference. It's not like a criticism or good and bad, but it is a real difference. So.
Richard, just before you sit down, I just want you to tell people, Richard is the founder, for those of you who don't know him, the founder of Connecticut Forum. And that's really a place where people go to have very interesting conversations, sometimes at a very high level. You also have a youth forum. Why did you start the forum way back?
Oh, you better hold that microphone. Because if I grab that microphone now, we're all in trouble. So I'll give the short answer. Related to this, I think one of the things is we felt many years ago, 23 years ago, that people are hungry for real engagement, face-to-face, personal connection and engagement, and real conversation, not scripted, not rehearsed, not predictable, real conversation and real people, and that we can handle it, and that we want to share that experience. We don't want to be isolated and segregated and separated by towns and by demographics and so on. We want to be connected, and Connecticut doesn't make it easy for that to happen, you know, on any level. So the Connecticut Forum felt like it could be a source of shared experience, of real experience, of face-to-face experience, and that we would all, you know, be enriched by that. That's my short answer.
Thank you, Richard. Reverend Manship, I think that you were raising your hand over here, and I should say that, I'll just have you stand. I think we'll look at that camera right there. I should say that you are from St. Rose of Lima Church in New Haven. Okay.
Yep, co-chair of Congregations Organized for New Connecticut. We act out of, as a Roman Catholic Church, we act out of several principles of Catholic social justice teaching, and one of them is the principle of subsidiarity, and that if we want change to happen, it needs to be on an impersonal basis, and if it needs to go up into a higher organization, whether family, parish, faith communities gathering together, that's how we teach our folks. We teach our folks about involvement in public life. It's a moral requirement for us to contribute to the common good. We teach hard at our parish and our organization, Connect, to distinguish between big P and little p politics. And when you have folks that are working many, many hours, multiple jobs, conversation is okay, but people want action. They want to see something done. They want to have an impact in their community. And so by engaging our folks around their self-interest, the things that they want to see happen, either in their neighborhood, in their town, in their region, in their state, people see things happening. It energizes them and it gets them involved in public life. Small P politics, not the big P.
Well, I want to interrupt for a minute because for people that don't know you, most people have heard about what happened in your neighborhood and in East Haven about the police and the police profiling people and giving a most difficult time apparently to Latino population. And you were the one who taped some of that and kind of got the whole thing going. And I guess did it become a much bigger thing than you thought, or did you already know it was as bad as it was when you started it?
We knew it was really bad, but it gets into a whole issue of race, right? So a middle-class white guy gets arrested, charges get trumped up. They had 27 drafts of my police report, each increasing in fiction in order to discredit me. But our folks had been beaten. We had one person beaten so bad when he was turned over to ICE to be deported. ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, actually called FBI to photograph him so they wouldn't be blamed for the condition he was in. Judicial marshals, when I was waiting for my arraignment, came over and said to me, we see so many people of color coming over from East Haven, bloodied and beaten. So this has been going on for quite some time, and we knew that we needed to go outside of East Haven to the Department of Justice in order to get redress.
And actually, I would think that some of your population at your church, some of your congregation, are a very vulnerable population that doesn't necessarily want to speak up, but wants to see action.
So it was the collectiveness, it was the leadership of the community, that it was the confidence that the Ecuadorian community had in the Ecuadorian leadership at St. Rose of Lima, that 4 gentlemen came forward and said, we want this to stop. We don't want other people to go through this. And it was those 4 gentlemen that came forward that allowed us to come around them and begin to develop a strategy of engagement. Lots of people were having encounters, bad encounters with a handful of officers that was bad fruit of a very bad culture.
Thank you. I'll get back to that a little bit later. But I would like to ask, is there anybody here who thinks that you can do a movement like that or accomplish something like that without collective action? Or does that have to happen? Because I keep hearing millennials are connected in different ways. Is there a way that millennials could pull off something like that? And Julia, I'm going to come to you and to Greg to talk about it a little bit.
Sure. I mean, in listening to this conversation, it's, fascinating to hear even the assumption that millennials aren't engaged because, of course, Arab Spring was brought up. There's so many different ways that people of all generations are connecting now, but I feel, I'm sure everyone in this room has felt very disheartened by the news in the last few weeks, but I also feel that every 2 years we go through this. 2 years ago, so many gun control protests and marches, nothing happened. 4 years ago, Occupy Wall Street, not a lot of impact there. So to keep asking the same generation and of course even going back to our own current war, to keep asking the same generation to go back and make a difference when those impacts haven't been felt on a national level, I think is really discouraging over time. And I don't have a solution, it's just an observation. I've had many friends as a part of all of those movements, and it's interesting to hear boomers say, we ended the war. Even that assumption or feeling, however true it may be, I'm sure had a huge impact going forth for decades that I feel that my generation hasn't yet had the chance to feel. And hopefully Ferguson and Hands Up, Don't Shoot can have some impact on police brutality and racism, but I don't know how confident, to be honest with you, I feel in that on a day-to-day basis.
Susan, you're in the classroom all the time with millennials, and I know that you discussed in your class, in fact, I think your whole department discussed this semester the differences between people and in wealth right here in our own state. I want you to talk a little bit about that and how your students saw it and how they also saw a place for themselves to try to do something about it.
We decided early in last semester that we would devote, the communication department at CCSU would devote the entire semester to looking at wealth and income inequality. And we looked specifically at Connecticut, where we are number 4 or maybe number 6 as far as the disparity. So my class was a writing class. We wrote a blog, and the first blog posts were very formulaic, and I don't know why I'm doing this, and I guess this is important because teacher said so, and other classes were planning a big event that we had on December 5th, and what we saw over the course of the semester were the little light bulbs going off, because you know this is happening, and you know when you don't feel like you're having an impact, why am I doing this? So when people get disengaged from the political process or any process, I understand, because if you don't feel like it's working for you, why bother? So we were talking about that. We were talking about engagement. We were talking about how wealth and income disparity affects them, particularly their college debt that's going to burden them forever, everything. And it was awesome, because by December 5th, when we had a large event, there were like 150 students, and people from the community came, and students took photos, they made videos, and they took it to a level no one anticipated. I have no idea if that made change. I was thinking as you were talking, it's such small, it's such little, but I hope one student out of CCSU goes and makes a huge difference based on that semester, and that's the only hope we have, is that there's one little spark.
We talked a little bit about war, and you talked about the boomers saying, yay, we ended the war. We have 2 military people here, a veteran and currently an active military. Would you two please stand up just for a second? I just want to get some of your observations. Arthur, you... Arthur, when you came back from Vietnam, would you have expected that people in the audience would applaud you?
No, not at all. Actually, when I arrived at Bradley Airport, I was the only guy in uniform, only person in uniform. And when I walked through, I felt pretty good. I just came back from Vietnam. I spent a year in the infantry. And as I walked through, I saw people pointing. And when I look at them, they look the other way. People would poke each other. Hey, look, guy in a uniform. So I knew that this was not going to be good. And I was not spit on. I was not heckled or anything like that. It was just that abandonment that was terrible. So the first thing I had to do when I got home was to get the heck out of my uniform. And because of that, when I see someone like this in uniform, I am so proud that what we went through as Vietnam vets, that the country had come to terms with, they had the wrong idea of us. So they had come to terms with it, and when I see someone in uniform, this is my homecoming. This is the homecoming I always wanted. And so I get a homecoming all the time.
Well, it's interesting because you were drafted. Yes, okay. And so a big difference. Here's Major Alyssa Kelleher. Step out this way just a little bit. We have an all-volunteer Army now, so people don't get drafted. So you make that choice. Why do you think millennials are making the choice to go into the military? Are there a number of reasons? In Arthur's age, there were people who joined up, but there were a lot of people who were drafted who were compelled to go.
I think that a lot of people join for very different reasons, whether it's they had military people in their family, or they want the challenge, or the desire to serve in and of itself. But I think that most people stay for the same reason as each other. And I think that most people stay because once they join, for whatever reason they joined for, they realize that there's a camaraderie there, that you are part of an organization that's bigger than yourself. And especially with the Connecticut National Guard, you get to see the results of your hard work right here in your own community, not just on the global scale, that too, but right here in your own community.
And we should say that you did go to Afghanistan. What kind of reaction did you get when you mixed with the people there?
I got a lot of different reactions there. Being a female, sometimes there was different reactions than some of the other male soldiers had. But overall, a lot of positive experiences, a lot of learning experiences. and really had a good time serving with the soldiers that were, to my left and right, and that's really the most important thing during any deployment experience.
I don't know that you necessarily had that kind of experience. Arthur, you wrote a book about your experience in Vietnam. You were at one of the bloodiest battles in Vietnam, the Battle of Hamburger Hill. Tell me a little bit about how people have reacted to your story since the book has been out.
Well, one of the key reasons I wrote that book is because I wanted people to know that a lot of the things that they heard as far as us burning villages, being rapists, abusing civilians, I'm sure those things occur in any war. But I never saw any of that with the people I was with. Either I was with a great bunch of guys or I was naive to it. I like to think I was with a great bunch of guys, which I know I was.
Thank you both so much, and thank you for your service. We appreciate your being here tonight. We'll talk a little bit more. We're going to let you guys switch off. We're going to switch panels and just do that while I bring Rich Hanley up. Rich is a professor at Quinnipiac University. Kion Wolf, if you would join us, that would be great. Come on over here. Just step back here. We'll go to one of these cameras. Oh, right here is good. Right in the middle. Rich Hanley is the head of the graduate journalism program at Quinnipiac. Is that right, Rich?
I still do some of that, yeah.
You do some of that. And Kion, we hear you all the time on WNPR, and we also know you're a photographer, you're a blogger, you do a lot of that sort of stuff.
I do.
Tell me a little bit about, Rich, how you've talked in the past about legacy media versus future media. Tell me a little bit about how that has changed for millennials.
Well, this, I think, really goes into the discussion about institutional mistrust. Millennials tend not to trust institutions for a very good reason, because they're not relevant to their day-to-day lives. So what millennials have done is create their own version of media, their own definition, and their own definition of news, in terms of art. And so that to them, when I say them, because I'm an old baby boomer, it's them, the institutions have failed in the sense that they're not relevant. So they go to social applications and whatnot to find out what their friends are interested in, and then they become interested in that. And that's how the news and information is shared. But it's not anything at all like traditional media, and that's why, in many respects, institutional media has failed, along with other institutions, except the military, which is interesting because, I can tell from our institution, millennials have respect for one institution other than Quinnipiac, and that is the military.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you talked about the institutions and also about the different applications. Kion, what Rich has said is that, for baby boomers, when we wanted information, we went to a newspaper, or maybe now we go online, whereas for millennials, a lot of it is about what your friends are saying, what they recommend, all those, the apps that tell you, go here, go there.
That's true, and it's a really fine line between what is news, where do you get your information. I do feel like I'm in a little bit of a bubble working for public radio, but it's the best kind of bubble because we get input from people around us. We get input from our friends. We get input from the people that run these places, and we try to figure out what are the stories that need to be told, what's important. And we're all human beings just like any newsmaker or producer, are just human beings after all. But I feel like it's a fine line between what is really important and what stories really need to be told and what's just fascinating, what's somewhat relevant, what's something that is relevant now but maybe even more relevant later. And like I said, we're all still human beings. That's one thing we can agree on for all these vast generational differences is we're all doing the best we can, and at the same time we're doing a really great job overall because I think everything's getting better.
Well, the interesting thing is that when I called you and said, I think you're a millennial, would you come and be, you said, please don't call me that. But we don't like those terms. You don't want to be labeled as a millennial or anything else.
Right, and I was born in 1980, and I wonder if that's a symptom of me being a millennial, that I don't want to be labeled, but it also could just be the human condition that, we're all individual, we're all unique snowflakes or what have you, but I don't know. That's the tough thing is it's like we were saying in the beginning, it's also really important to put labels on things. That's how we recognize things. We categorize things. That's how we got to the top of the food chain is we recognize patterns and we make predictions based on them. And so here we are as people trying to say, all right, well, I was born at this time and in this era, therefore I must tend to be a certain way. Part of me sees that, I do, but part of me is like, no, we're all different. And within the structures that we're being labeled as, we're still so varied. I think it's interesting.
Rich, you were talking about how today, and I want to bounce off something that Kion said, that the definition of news is completely different. And, you know, when we were kids, the news was served to us. You had the newspaper that came into your house every day or morning or night. You had Walter Cronkite. You had, you know, and it was, they told you, here's the news, this is what you need to know. That doesn't happen for millennials.
No, because in our heyday, the news came in small doses in the sense that it was at regular intervals. Morning newspaper, evening news. That's the only time of day when you consumed it. Now it comes in a torrent of information. I mean, literally, you could get news from all over the world, from many, many different sources, you know, in a few seconds by just simply checking your Facebook feed or checking Twitter. And young folks today, and millennials, or and anybody for that matter, who's engaged with the technology, makes these decisions about what to pick and what to choose. So there's this massive array of choices. And I think that's where some of the confusion, you know, can be located, and that we mistake all these choices, you know, as if they're not really focused on stuff. They are focused on stuff, but they're focused in the moment. They, to me at least, millennials, if you can call them that, live in the present. That's why there are, I think one of the members of the audience was mentioning about, you know, hopping from cause to cause. Well, that's a result of technology, and the lack of an institutional response to that technology that's adequate to build institutions or reinforce institutions. So on Occupy Wall Street can make a difference with the financial framework and so on and so forth, the Coney Ice Bucket Challenge. I mean, just look at that velocity of causes that are confronted by young people every day. And there's no really firm institutional framework to deal with this, this level of churn.
For better or worse.
Yeah,
I want to have somebody else join us. Where is Alden? Alden Hayes. Alden, come out here and just join us for a minute. Alden has described to me, he's the social media manager at the Community Health Center, and you have described to me people who are either digital natives or digital immigrants. What do you mean by that?
So
I think we have one of each here.
Yeah. So that's actually from the work of Mark Prensky back in 2000, talking about education. And for digital natives, these are the people who have grown up where there's always been digital technology around for them. When they want to take a picture, of course they grab their phone, right? They want information, the first thing they do is they go to Google. For digital immigrants, Prensky talks a lot about how immigrants always keep their accent. So the older folks, yeah, you know, they may get good at using their cell phone, they may get good at Googling stuff, but it's still not how they think. They still have this sort of other way of thinking. Now,
I have to say that piece really struck me because as a digital immigrant, I noticed, okay, so I can write my stories on my computer and I can get information online, but when it comes down to editing, I print it out and I mark it up with a pencil. That's my accent, right?
That's a great example. That is exactly it. Yeah.
I don't know. There always was digital since you've been around.
I'm proud to say that my family was one of the first prodigy families. FXTV 10F. It was an email platform, and you couldn't even pick out your username. It was all sequential. But yeah, I definitely grew up surrounded by technology and surrounded by tech heads. But what's funny is, my parents, you know, here we are in 2014, my parents are brilliant. My mom worked at NASA. She was the head of HR for the Secretary of the State for Connecticut Valley Hospital. My stepfather went to Kings Point. He started the Prosecutors Union for the state of Connecticut. He's assistant state's attorney. You can imagine how I was raised, a lot of fear. It worked out, though, as far as I can tell. But when smartphones started coming into play in our world, their hands said, no, it's too complicated. And to me, not only as a millennial, but I also worked for T-Mobile for 9 years. So I sold cell phones, retail sales. So I was really into technology. But to me, as far as I can see, technology's sole interest is in getting faster, simpler, more efficient. So the fact that my beautiful, brilliant parents were being like, I can't, but then you see a toddler figure it out. Blew my mind. And now, thankfully, they've all gotten to the point where they embrace it, at least to the point where they can text and put smiley faces, which is all I really want them to be able to do.
This is why people have grandchildren, so that they can show them how to run the iPad.
Yeah, but progress is possible, but it is a really interesting divide to see, and I saw it when I was working in cell phones. The age, really, you could see somebody walk in, and you could see, you knew what you're going to expect from what they expected from their devices that they were so begrudgingly getting into.
And you do know flip phones are coming back, and they're the cool thing now.
I'm a Nokia fan till I die, so I am in the old school Nokia, the ones that you could snap in half and they'd still work. So I'm with you.
All right, I'm going to let you guys sit down for a minute while I introduce our next panel, because we have brought a few people up here to join us. To my immediate left is Oz Griebel. Many people know you as the head of the Metro Hartford Alliance. They also know that you ran for governor. And I think one of the things that a lot of people who live here know about you, Oz, is that you are one of the biggest cheerleaders for the city of Hartford of anyone that anyone could ever be.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for that. Susan Dunn is joining us. Susan Dunn is the head of United Way, the first female to be the head of the United Way, and has a lot to talk about with civic engagement. I want to talk to you about how we can choose our civic engagement through the United Way. Keisha Ash runs a terrific organization. You're a PhD in
chemical engineering.
Chemical engineering.
Earning my PhD.
Okay, working on the PhD.
Yeah.
And she has a great organization that we're going to talk about a little bit. And Lanham, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself. So happy to have you here tonight, and a little bit about what you've been working on.
So I'm the program manager at the Connecticut Forum for the Connecticut Youth Forum.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we work with high school students throughout the state of Connecticut to have conversations about important issues.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, because apparently we have a little bit of a problem with your mic, so we'll come back to you after after we have a technician who can look at that. Oz, I just want to ask you a little bit about how you think young people have started to change the city, or if you do think they have.
Well, there's no question the demographic makes a huge difference. The downtown housing has brought a lot of younger people, and it's also attracted people who have left their suburban homes to come in. I think that begins to hit, just on the political side briefly, I think it'll change the makeup of future elections in the city. Downtown now will be a genuine neighborhood along with the other neighborhoods in the city. So I think that kind of, it's certainly younger people, but it's a number of people who've moved in with the additional housing units that came in here starting back in 2001, 2002 that are now in the process of being augmented by Governor Malloy's additional investment. So that's just going to change the mix politically, and certainly downtown, you've got more people on the street. Ideally, as more feet are on the street, they'll attract additional retail. And you see what's happened down on Front Street with the restaurants. We believe that retail will be behind that in large part because of the increased number of people living in the area.
Oz, I think what's interesting is that the people that I know who are moving downtown are either millennials or boomers who said, I don't need this big old house in Avon anymore because my kids are gone, and so I'd like to get a nice apartment across from Bushnell Park. So the two generations are going to end up living side by side at some point here.
Yeah, we do.
It's good. It's a good thing, right?
Because I are one, so yes, that's right. There's a very mixed group of individuals living downtown.
Yeah, Julia?
Hi, I already spoke, but this is my husband, Greg, and we've been living downtown for 8 years or so. And one note I have... Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Thank you
Greg,
so much.
You can stand up too, please.
And I just want to preempt a stereotype about millennials is that, they're very narcissistic, or I guess we're very narcissistic. I'm with Kion. Greg and I thought we were mistakenly invited to this. But that narcissism can be translated into really wanting to make an impact. I want my life to mean something. And that is a huge part of the reason that we live in Hartford, is because when we were living in bigger cities, more established cities, we felt less important to the city, to put it the most narcissistic way possible, and to harness that desire to have impact and make good in a smaller town or a town that really feels like it's struggling has been really exciting to us and a lot of our peers. And I think, that's a conversation I hear more and more every day, is we have an opportunity to make a difference or fill an empty space is something.
And your husband is shaking his head. So
yeah.
But I absolutely agree. We chose to move to Hartford after living in New York City and in London, and thinking these cities they're all set. There are people here working really hard to make this city great, and then there are all these young people who want to get involved, but it's already full. And so then the thought is, where can we make that difference? And so we came to Hartford and started looking at every empty storefront. When I first moved here, everyone was like, "There's nothing to do in Hartford. All the buildings are empty." And so we said, let's look at those empty buildings as opportunity. for young people to start things. And so
Oz is smiling. I can see that's right up his alley.
Yeah, Oz was one of the first people I met when I moved to Hartford. I started coming to the Metro Alliance events. But yeah, so Julie and I started a company. TJ, who spoke before, started a company. We have a lot of young people seeing those empty windows as opportunities to start something, again, because of that discussion around institutions letting us down. Larger institutions could also count as employers, corporations, whereas our parents worked for the same company for 40 years and then retired. A lot of younger people are, because of shareholder value and all those things, there are a lot of people are choosing the more affordable solution, even if that means laying off thousands of employees. And so we don't trust the institution, so we've got to make our own so that we know we can trust them.
Yeah, and when I go on LinkedIn, I see that my younger connections on LinkedIn, they've had more jobs than I have, and they're quarter of my age or half my age. Susan, I want to ask you a little bit about civic engagement in terms of United Way, because you have a really, I think, a very cool thing in that you can really customize your civic engagement if you go to the United Way website. Talk about that a little bit, please.
Right. Well, we're using technology, which, how great is that? So you can go to our website, and we have a tool where you can say, here's where I live, here's what I'd like to do, here's how often I'd like to volunteer, and then something will come back to you, hopefully, if there is an opportunity in our community to volunteer that meets your needs. Or you can have opportunities come to you periodically. So there might not be something now, but maybe in a month or a few weeks, there might be something that meets your needs for how you want to give your time in the community.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because some people have said to me that, what millennials have, they may not have a lot of money to donate right now, but they have maybe some time and they have some talent, but you have to find the right place for them. You can't have, somebody doesn't want to just necessarily come in and stuff envelopes. That's not going to be what they're looking for.
I think that's very true, and I think that's true really. We see it whether you're a millennial or a boomer. It's what you're passionate about is where you want to volunteer. So we have to understand that, and we have an emerging leaders group similar to HYPE, but this group came together and said they really wanted to focus on something, and they've selected children in reading, and so that's where they're putting all their volunteer efforts because they're able to give their time and they're able to see results, and that's very important to them also.
Keisha, I want to come back to you and let you talk a little bit about what you saw when you decided to get into the STEM fields. I understand from a TED Talk that you gave that your original idea was to be a princess. That didn't work out.
Didn't really work out.
And then you were going to be a pop star, but then what, your dad told you can't sing?
Didn't have the vocals for that.
Okay, so the backup was to go into biochemistry.
Yes, into engineering. And so that story, it's similar to a lot of other things, having different inclinations towards it, having role models, having mentors, having inspiration, having encouragement, and support in going into those fields. And so that was my story, but once I actually got there, I looked around and I said, okay, there aren't a lot of women, there aren't a lot of minorities in these fields, and what can we do to change that? And so the organization that I've co-founded with Tiffany St. Bernard, who's also a PhD candidate, she's actually at Cornell University in her second year in biomedical engineering, but we co-founded it to create more opportunities for people, because as we've discussed today, it's not a lack of want for millennials and others to get involved, it's a lack of how. Understanding where the opportunities are, how to access them, and more importantly, how to access them in a way that is suitable for their lifestyle. And so that's where a lot of the impetus behind this organization that we've created is based.
So you're mentoring children not just here in Connecticut, but really all across the country because of the tools that you're using.
Yes, absolutely. So we understand that we're in a technological age and people are on Facebook and Instagram and all these other, they're using all these other tools, but there is still a lot of value in connecting in person and having those opportunities to impact your community, where you live, where you work. And so our model combines those two aspects, where you can get involved in an online manner through our platform, or you can match with local opportunities surrounding the STEM fields. And just to note, we focus on the STEM fields because obviously a lot of the differentiation between millennials and boomers is technology, whether it be the use of it, sort of the approach. One of the comments earlier in terms of millennials looking to themselves. I think a big part of that is because there are so many tools that are available that can take one person with an idea and, you know, if they can build a website, if they know how to put together newsletters, they have all these different skills that are enabled by technology, they can really build a brand for themselves that expands beyond their small network. And so being able to leverage that aspect of the technology and combine it with other opportunities in person was critical for us, and I think is one of the key reasons that we have been able to be successful in Connecticut and as we're expanding outside of the state as well.
Lanham, I think that you have a microphone that works now, so tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
So I am the program manager of the Connecticut Youth Forum over right next door with Richard. And what I do is I work with high school students throughout the state of Connecticut to have conversations around issues that are important to students. I came from Public Allies, which is an AmeriCorps AmeriCorps organization that works in Bridgeport, Hartford, and New Haven, and we're put into nonprofits to kind of have an apprenticeship experience to learn how to be leaders in our communities with civic engagement. So there's a lot of opportunities in Connecticut to become civically involved, especially if you're a young person looking for some meaning, and Public Allies and the Youth Forum are just two of those places.
We talked a little bit before about civil rights and the civil rights struggles, and of course it's more than ethnic minorities, it's more than black and white, it's a lot of other civil rights, and among those that boomers have made a big difference in, I like to think, Robin McHale, and I think you might agree with me, and Joelle, why don't you stand up? Robin is the founder and the head of True Colors, and I believe that you and your wife were the first same-sex couple to adopt a baby in the state?
Yeah, that's true. When we were my daughter was 9 months old, and actually when she was born, I remember that there was also this vote on marriage, and so this and the vote failed. And I remember in writing this op-ed that night and just sobbing and realizing that I was needing to choose between, my daughter, becoming my daughter, and my wife becoming my wife. And it was like, wow, how do you choose between that? But yeah.
When I think a lot of people think, okay, well, now we have gay marriage, so we got it all worked out. Thank you, boomers. You got that fixed for us.
I think that, when people were talking about Richard was talking about, millennials counting on themselves and boomers looking to systems. That was really different in the LGBT community. That in the LGBT community, we could not count, boomers couldn't count on any systems. Systems were definitely, places that where prejudice lived, whether it was a school or corporations, whatever. And that millennials, with the onset of marriage and the concept that, one of the reasons marriage was so successful is that the strategy was, we're just like you. Right? That look at us, look at our families, we're just like you, which many of us are, and many of us are not. And so that strategy of we're just like you both left out a lot of people, and then also a lot of folks are now looking to systems to resolve, my civil rights have been violated, so I'm going to go to, CHRO, and I'm going to do and make the systems fix it. And I think it's such a weird thing between, the elder LGBT folks and younger LGBT folks. I think Ferguson and some of the stuff that's happening within the broader community and around racism gives us an opportunity for young LGBT folks to step back in a different way. And I've seen some of that, and I've also seen some people really backing away and saying, no, we got our thing. We're, good luck, y'all. We're done.
Robin, I want to talk to Joelle because he's an intern. Joelle, I'm going to have you turn this way toward that camera. Yeah, because you're an intern with True Colors now. And the things that Robin was just saying about how some older gays and lesbians want to say, okay, we got everything done, and it's not the case for you.
No, I've actually realized that, so comments like that to me are a little insulting, because when someone says, okay, so we're all set, like you guys we're moving forward, or there is a progression, it's kind of ignoring the fact that the reality in our world is that we are still very oppressed, and there are still areas that need to be addressed. So like my involvement with True Colors, I've found out that there are so many areas where I as a millennial can get involved and need to get involved in to make change. And I think that that's something that the millennials bring to the table. They bring the recognition that there is difference and that people look different, and that not just that, but people think differently, and we have to include everyone. So that's something I think that the millennials are pushing for, and not just pushing for, but that they recognize. And we bring that to the table, that we recognize difference, and the world is a very different place than it was when the baby boomers were living in it.
Yeah. Is there anybody who wants to make a comment? Don't let me take all the action here. If anybody wants to raise their hand and be part of the conversation, please do, and we'll get a microphone over to you. But in the meanwhile, I'm coming over to see Melissa Marshall. Melissa, talking about civil rights. One of the big civil rights fights, I think, for boomers was for people who have disabilities.
Right, and I was just about to raise my hand, so it was a good coincidence. Yes, one of the things...
Or I was on your wavelength.
Or something like that. One of the biggest things that we've done as a boomer generation and people with disabilities is we passed the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it's really interesting because it's kind of the best of times and the worst of times for people with disabilities, because on one hand, we have passed the most progressive legislation impacting the rights of people with disabilities anywhere in the world. And how many people know that we've had a major civil rights movement doing that? It's kind of the paradox. We are not noticed. When I think about Occupy Wall Street or other progressive organizations or progressive media that I listen to kind of compulsively, they'll name literally 30 oppressed groups and 30 members of protected classes, and I'm waiting for, and people with disabilities, and people with disabilities, and people with disabilities. And I think the president said it once or twice. And I remember, I think it was Rachel Maddow talking about how the president referred to gay men and lesbians in the inaugural address and how that was wonderful, but it's kind of tokenism. And I'm thinking, we'd kill for that level of tokenism. We'd kill for that level of acknowledgement. Not to say that he's acknowledging LGBT people enough, and there's a struggle. I also think the intersectionality of the struggle of people with disabilities and LGBT people and people of color is often ignored, because what happens is the oppression is compounded. If you're a woman with a disability, you earn less. Exponentially less. If you're a woman of color with disability, you're still exponentially less. If you're a woman of color with a disability who's transgender, you still earn still exponentially less. I think we need to think about that intersectionality rather than being uncomfortable with each other and feeling that.
I do have to say, though, that things have changed so much, I think, since boomers were in school, for instance. I went all through school, all through grammar school and all through high school. I never had a child with a disability in my class. And I see the president of the Board of Education over there from Trumbull shaking her head. I mean, that's just not how it is now.
And I was one of those children you didn't see, and I walked all the time then. I missed 2 years of school because I was told I had a disability and I was a fire hazard and I couldn't come. So it was perfectly legal. And I'm a late boomer, too. Unlike Susan, I'm one of the younger boomers. But in 1974, it was legal to say I couldn't go to high school. So there has been enormous change. And my friend Chris will say we've only made a dent. And that's true, but there's been enormous progress. There was no accessible parking when I grew up. It was legal for businesses to say, you can't come here because you're using a wheelchair. That doesn't happen to me as much as it used to. It still happens. It still happens legally. It still happens socially. There's still the microaggressions of people with disabilities, and there's hundreds, if not thousands of them every day, but the world has really changed. Yet 66% of us are still unemployed. So it's a paradoxical.
And the crazy thing about that is that technology should make it so much easier for people who have disabilities to be able to work. Deb, I wanted to have you just stand up for a minute because I see you shaking your head there, and I know that as the head of the Board of Education or the chairman of the board, that this is probably an issue that you've worked tirelessly on in Trumbull.
We worked tirelessly on it, and to agree with you, growing up in the 50s and 60s, I didn't go to school with anyone with a disability. I had no knowledge. And now, as the chairman of the Trumbull Board of Education, we go above and beyond to make sure that any child with a disability has their needs met. And it's not easy, because to do this costs money. So we struggle with budgets and what we have to do, but it's very, very important. And when you say 60% of the time you still go to a place and you can't go in because you're in a wheelchair, I find that just in this day and age, I think you should be able to go anywhere. This gentleman wanted to comment.
Yeah. Hi, Chris. This is Chris Blake.
Well, it's true. About depends on 70 or 80% of the time. If you mention the word disability, they think you need to be taken care of in some shape or form. I have a disability myself, bad experiences, having a normal conversation, then disability comes up and they start slowly backing away and stop talking to you because they think like someone need to take care of you or watch you, and then changes the whole perception of how people approach you and how you approach people. Most people don't know it because most people in my generation are in hiding. It's got shut down by institutions so many times. And tried to offer, and they have mental disability or challenge on your intelligence and your age. So you get shut down most of the time, and you find other outlets.
So we still have a lot that we need to keep doing. If anybody has a comment, please raise your hand, and I'd love to come over and talk to you. Can we get a microphone over there, please? Yes.
Okay.
Tell us who you are first.
Melinda Johnson, and I'm speaking from a background of mental health and working with mental health and substance abuse addiction within the greater Hartford area. And I just want to speak to the idea of this form of disability that has really overtaken Hartford in a great portion. And when we look at the populations of Hartford and we look at poverty in particular, we see that a good portion of those that are in poverty are also on abusing substances. And then afterwards, we see a great portion of those individuals that are abusing substances are also suffering from mental health disorders. And when I look at the demographics of downtown Hartford on a day-to-day basis, you have your businessmen walking with their briefcases, you have your school children walking with their backpacks, and you have your local crackheads, and you have your local substance abusers, and you have your local individuals who are struggling with schizophrenia. And there is a very limited amount of resources that are dealing with this particular issue that has completely overtaken a good portion of Hartford and has gone unspoken about. And I think I would just like to hear from our panel what in particular your particular division of civic duty is to these type of injustices when mental health is something that's prevailing but not something that's well addressed at this moment. And when we talk about certain injustices with disabilities, the mental disabilities of mental illness has also been something that has been overseen.
Okay, so that's a challenge to the panel. Oz, would you like to start?
It's a very complicated subject. I'm not even going to try to suggest that there is a comprehensive approach to this. This is particularly since the Newtown incident, there have probably been 5 or 6 commissions that have looked at the whole issue of mental health. It's not limited to Hartford. We know that any more than poverty is limited to the city. I think that I would just make some general statement in the context of this. This has been challenged. This has been labeled as millennials versus boomers, and I would say it's millennials and boomers because these issues, whether they're mental health, whether they're fiscal issues at the state, are going to require all of us to pull together. There's significant issues and choices that we have to make as a society. And you look at the limitations that we have in the state budget right now. They can't invest in education, can't invest in mental health treatment, can't invest in education. It's a major issue, and collectively, it is going to have to be addressed. I'm not a mental health expert. I don't profess to know exactly how to address the issue. Our job, what we get paid to do, is to see that this region has adequate jobs for people who want to work so that our tax base can grow, to be very honest, because it's only through a growing tax base that we're going to be able to have the wherewithal to address a number of these issues that we're talking about.
Susan, what about the kind of services that United Way offers? Are there more services addressing that issue than there were a few years ago?
I don't know if there are more, but we do support mental health counseling as part of our package. But what I was going to say is there's not enough resources. We don't have enough resources. Philanthropy doesn't have enough resources. The state doesn't put enough resources into it. There's just no doubt about that. And I think where we would focus is also in early years. It's got to start at the beginning. You can't let it go. It gets too late. And to Oz's point also, it benefits all of us by investing in mental health counseling and some of these other things. It really benefits all of us. It benefits our community to be a thriving and healthy community. community. So it really, it's, there can be a stigma to mental health, but there shouldn't be, because it impacts all of us, whether it's directly in our family or not, because it's impacting our community. And it is something we need to put more dollars to, and remove the stigma, and start early and start young, because for children there's a huge deficit in terms of services for children with mental health issues.
Wanda Correa, I'd like to have you stand up for a minute here. Wanda is from the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. I think maybe we can look toward this camera over here. And one of your jobs is really to reach out to millennials and try to bring them into the circle of philanthropy. How do you go about doing that? Philanthropy has changed a lot over the generations.
Sure. So this conversation is really just wonderful, because what we're seeing here is the passion of so many needs in the community. And the community foundation world, really, particularly the Hartford Foundation, was created by the community for the community. And it's through the generosity of what Oz mentioned a few minutes ago, of collective giving, that then we can look at being able to see what it is that's going on. So I wanted to address, and I'm glad you asked me to speak, because I want to address, so what can institutions do? And the Hartford Foundation is been designed to be here in perpetuity. We've been here we'll celebrate 90 years in 2015, and we will be here. And so the key is to continue to make ourselves relevant, similar to the other institutions that we talked about, with various different generations. And we have to look at, then, the responsibility is incumbent upon us to let various different generations know why we're still relevant. And the biggest piece is because we know the community, and we're here for the community. But also is, what is it that the other generations need to know? How do we engage them? And when we talked about millennials, we know that we hear examples here that their alliance is not to institutions, but to causes. So what do you need to do to reach out, to let folks know about your cause? What is it about your cause that you're doing? What is it about the way in which you're doing it? The concept of community, I thought it was very interesting starting out, where it was a thought from your survey that perhaps there weren't, only 8% of folks that they solve problems with their community neighbors. Well, define what community neighbor is for a boomer versus a millennial. I tell you, millennials have strong communities, except the way they communicate is different. You can get a millennial to give you their community in less than 3 seconds when they tweet something, as I'm sure someone's doing right now. And that's their community. And because it may not be knocking on the neighbor's door and talking to them, doesn't mean that it's less, or it's less impactful. So it really is incumbent upon the institutions that are here and that care about this community and know this community to reach out, to really reach out and engage folks wherever they are. And then the last thing I'll say is that, it really is a both and not an either or proposition. This is our community, and however it is that we engage and however it is that our passion is in, we are here, and we all need to be able to work on these things together.
And I think, Oz, to your point about millennials versus boomers, I think we didn't really mean in that title that it's you against us,
it's a
or
good
us
media,
against
it's a good
them.
media title.
Maybe, but I think it was more what are our skills versus what are their skills, and how do we find a middle ground somewhere where both can work together.
I just say, from our standpoint, we work with people from 20 to 70 every day, and it all has to deal with people's attitudes, both in terms of their attitudes about themselves, is the glass half full, is the glass half empty, and it's also based on fundamental respect for one individual from another. I really sometimes think we make more out of these differences than are. There are serious differences, but I don't think they're all in the age issue as much as we'd like to think.
Tim, you have been nodding your head behind me. I want to just give you the microphone for a minute to have you stand up. This is Tim Herbst. I'll reintroduce him, first selectman of Trumbull, and you were nodding at just about everything that Wanda was saying.
And including what Wanda said and also what Oz said when we talk about there's no easy solution. And almost 2 decades ago, there was that debate of whether it takes a village or whether it takes a family. And in actuality, it takes both. It takes both. It does take community. I think when we talk about what happened in Newtown and we look at mental health, I think it's about a community being engaged, about a family being engaged, about a community providing opportunities for young people, whether they be extracurricular activities. We're having a debate right now in Trumbull about eliminating pay-to-participate fees for student athletes and those that participate in fine arts. And we want to eliminate pay-to-participate fees. And I had a constituent come to my office to say, I'm opposed to that. It was a baby boomer. I'm opposed to that. I paid for my kids. They should pay now. And my response to that was, In this day and age, when it takes more than a family and a village, it takes a community. I would rather have young people engaged in after-school athletics, after-school programs, extracurricular activities, and being engaged with students and with teachers and with coaches and with mentors, rather than getting on the internet and seeing bad things and learning bad things on their own. So I really think, I think about that whole debate 20 years ago of takes a village, it takes a family. I think it takes both. And I think that's something millennials need to recognize going forward. And it can't, to Oz's point, it can't be us versus them. It's got to be a community effort.
That's true. Keisha, you were raising your hand. I'll let you have the floor.
I just want to say a few things in terms of giving and in terms of some of the characteristics of the millennials. I think that, and I don't know the statistics behind this, but I would venture to say that the millennials may be one of the more so educated sort of bunch, and if anything, we can tell that by the amount of student debt that we have as a group. Very educated, very diverse, actually one of the most diverse generations. And we're very results-oriented and outcome-driven. And I'm actually a member of the Emerging Leaders Society, and one of the reasons that I joined was for that exact reason that Susan mentioned, in terms of we have a very specific goal in mind in terms of our service, and so that's how we can align not only our resources but also our time towards that very specific outcome. I don't think that we're a generation where we want to say, okay, I'm just going to give $100 and now, okay, my duty is done. It's more so, where is that $100 going? Is there an opportunity for me to participate in where that $100 is going? And is there an opportunity for me to spread that amongst my peers? And I think that we can really see that right now, where we may have reached near a saturation point, but crowdfunding, crowd raising, it's huge. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, GoFundMe. One of my mentees sent me, hey, I'm organizing for my gospel choir. We have a GoFundMe account. Send it out to your network. And so the way that people are giving and the way that people expect to give is very different. They want to be more affiliated and associated with that and draw in some of that sense of community that we so desperately want and we so desperately need, but due to sort of the way that we're in everything all the time, it can be a little hard to attain.
Yeah, I'm sitting here twitching a little bit because I'm in agreement, and yet, let's take, for example, Newtown happened. Our governor was right on the scene leading the effort within a few hours. In Missouri, in Ferguson, it took Jay Nixon 4 days to respond. There is a gulf here. And while I think you all feel what I'm saying, I hope you do, I'm troubled that lives, the response to Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. Well, yes, and you missed the point because there's a specificity here. I often hear intersectionality raised as a stop point for the conversation around deeper work. 50 years ago, Dr. King linked race, poverty, and militarism. Very clear. He was very clear about this, what he called triple threat. And I wonder how we respond 50 some odd years later when here in the city of Hartford, while we're one of the richest, this gap continues to exist. Oz and folk like him are doing great work. But Pookie and Ray Ray catching hell. And I don't quite, that's to the point here. There are social ills that are presumably solvable. With all of the resource that we have to bear, we throw our hands up and go home. And my heart aches. And I can't look at suffering, and for me, Black and brown suffering in cities like Hartford, Bridgeport, and New Haven, and not have a response and not go home at night troubled by that,
Thank you, Bishop.
Diane,
Mary, I want to have you stand up. This is State Representative Mary Mashinsky. I think that now you may be the longest-serving legislator in the State House.
With Martin Looney, the senator, we're the two longest-serving. Yes, I'm longest-serving in the House.
You were elected really on, I think your original platform was really all about environmentalism, and you have continued to be a very staunch environmentalist. Some people would say, boy, you know, the Boomers did a pretty good job. We cleaned up the river, we cleaned up the Sound. How'd we do?
That is true. And we have eagles back now and osprey back and fish back in rivers that didn't used to happen in Connecticut. And people are returning to rivers and bodies of water that they used to run away from. But now we have whole new challenges. And the challenge now for everybody, millennials and boomers, is climate change. That's our big challenge. And we all have to work on it together. And we won't even finish the job. We will be passing it on to the millennials. But we all have to work together to change the way we use energy and to be more efficient and to think about the future generations so we can pass on this wonderful earth to the next generation.
Do you find that your younger constituents do have a strong feeling about that?
Yeah, I do. I think they're very interested in food production, sustainable food, clean food. Millennials are very interested in bicycle transit and public transit. They're more willing to use it than boomers are. And boomers still drive a lot. And my own constituents, I try to persuade them that public transit is a good thing, and they still want to drive everywhere. And then they'll sit in the traffic jams every single day.
Wondering, why am I in this traffic jam?
Cursing in the traffic jams. And I'll say, high-speed rail is coming. You're going to like it. It's really nice. You'll be able to read on the way to work or listen to music or whatever. You'll get there, you'll be happy, and it won't be so stressful. And I think that's something that they will gradually come to, but the millennials already get.
How you have stayed in the legislature this long and still are so optimistic, congratulations to you. Oz wants to make a comment to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to Bishop Selder's point, because I think this is the issue. The issue is about undereducated individuals who are not getting opportunities in the workplace. There are serious, there's nobody who can, I think we all live this very serious issue that the bishop is putting his finger on. I also think there are many things that are going on in this city that the private sector individuals bring that are trying to address a number of issues on the education front. A Billings Forge trying to bring people into culinary schools to get them into the workplace. But it's an extraordinary challenge that we have. And a forum like this on what the city is going, what New Haven is doing, where this concentration of poverty is, and where that almost is a sentence that you're not coming out of it, is a very serious issue that we're all grappling with, because it has a significant impact on all of us as we go forward. So I fully agree with what Bishop said, and I think it's something to continue to have a focus on as we go forward.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And Susan Campbell, I want to have you come back, because one of the things that you and I have talked about just personally is that what the bishop said, you just can't walk away. And one of the things that you're trying to do is to figure out how to solve homelessness. And people say, well, it can't be done. There's no way you can do that.
That's not true. Actually, you can do that. We just have to have the political will to do that, as we have to have the political will to address seriously wealth and income inequality, racism, homophobia, you name it. You just have to have the political will. It's so expensive to have homelessness. It's so much cheaper to house people with all the services they need, and that runs counter to what people want to believe. But once you see the data and the numbers, it's all solvable. Vote for me. No, I'm kidding.
Thank you, Susan. Butch, would you mind standing up for a minute? Butch Lewis is a person that a lot of us know because he's been doing some speaking around town lately. You're a former Black Panther. You came back from Vietnam and you decided to join the Black Panthers because why? You started the chapter here in Hartford, right?
Basically because when you came back, I came back in 66, 67, and it was racism. It was racism, and the Army had just integrated in 63, and I was in a racist organization, Big Bloody One, and I love it, okay? And I was in a recon unit. So when you come back to Hartford, Hartford hasn't changed to the day, and I'm 70. You have two cities. You have the Mason-Dixon line, which starts at the tunnel, goes north, and you have downtown Hartford. No change has changed. So what do you do? I'm listening to everybody talking about change in Hartford. Hartford hasn't changed because we don't want nobody to be honest with each other. No one has been on. And as far as the housing with the Hartford has the basic problem of letting the DOC, the Department of Correction, dump everybody's prisons in Hartford and tell them get back to their cities the best way they can. That's why you have 65% of the people in the homeless shelters are not from Hartford.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, Butch, because I think that Tony Harp, who's the mayor of New Haven, would say that that's been a long-time problem in New Haven as well, that people come out of the prisons and they're sent to New Haven.
They're dropped off here. This is the hub. This is the hub. Any probation officer, all of them is dumped right here in Hartford. Okay, we have more non-poverty organizations than we have people in Hartford. No, seriously, Hartford only has 123,000 people. We have 126 anti-poverty agencies. So you got keeping people ignorant. You got 20,000 people serving anti-poverty. Hartford has spent more money in anti-poverty than any organization, any city in the United States, basically because CRT is the oldest anti-poverty agency in America. And we have spent more money. We have spent more money in poverty in Hartford than we have spent in World War II and Korea. And nothing has changed.
And haven't solved it.
And it hasn't solved because we have two cities.
Yeah. Do any of the millennials here have any suggestions on, obviously the boomers haven't done a great job on this, where are we going to go? What are we going to do next?
And I'm amazed that you allowed Butch to talk, because Butch, that's my uncle, him and my father. You know, they were both radicals. But I think where we are now is the fact that we have to get behind initiatives like United Way. We have to get behind initiatives like our NRZs. How you can tell a thriving community is how the young people and how people are involved in the civic organizations that's doing stuff. And I think that we have to find a way to get people like me involved. You didn't have to tell me to get involved, because I see the poverty that you see. The young men come to my church straight out of prison, so it pushes me. I watch my dad work hard for people. So, you know, for me, I've always seen it, but for the folks who just aren't engaged, we have to find ways, like you said, to get them into the cause. And like Keisha said, it's not they don't want to do it, but it's the how. And we have to find out how to get these young people involved. We have to make that push towards something. Ferguson is a great example. Folks didn't know what to do, but we did a march down Albany Avenue. 400 people marched. You know, they found a way to get involved. So we have to find ways to get people involved in the United Ways, the Metro Alliances, and the NRZs, and the community groups. And then we'll see the change in the community that we want to see. But right now, people are disinterested. Like you said, there are two Hartfords. There's downtown, and there's everywhere else, kind of. So we got to figure out how to blend. That's what I'm trying to say. We have to find out how to blend in our community. And that's not just here, but in every state across the country.
And I should say that, you know, it's not just two Hartfords. This is a program that's being seen statewide. It's two states of Connecticut, really. Kind of think that you're kind of raising your hand there. So.
Thanks. I have this pearl of optimism I hold on to when I think about the differences between all of us, personally, but also generationally. I was confirmed in the Catholic Church as a deal so I could stop going to church. It worked. I currently don't believe in God or superstition or karma. And for the long time, I felt hard about that. And we were talking about Sandy Hook, and on that day, I was working for WNPR, and I do photography for them as well. And that day was hard for everybody on the planet, I think. And in the news media, it was a different beast, for sure. And towards the end of that day, at Asylum Hill Congregational Church, they had a vigil, and I wanted to photograph it, and also down at the carousel in Bushnell Park. So when I got to the church, I felt weird because I was at a church, but I felt tired and scared and full of emotion, much like now, thinking about it.
And when I walked into the church, and I had all my camera gear on me, and I had a big, huge microphone, too, in case I could just talk to some people and get some voices. As people were filling into the church, I leaned against the wall. And all of a sudden, it occurred to me, this is a safe place to feel something. So I wasn't going to feel anything at work. And I wasn't going to feel anything on the way. But when I got there, as a non-believer, I started to cry and release how I was feeling that day. And even though I still maintain my lack of beliefs or beliefs in other things, I still look at that night as a moment where I have this optimism that even though I'm not going to go back to that church for what it maybe wants me to come back for, I can still walk by it and remember that day. I can walk by it. They've got this rainbow flag, and it says, God is still listening. And I think that's so cool, that we're all still listening, that we're all still talking. There's maybe it's a symptom of me being a millennial, or it's just me, but I feel optimistic that we can talk and we can listen, we can process, and it matters. So thank you.
Thank you. I want to talk to Phil Ouellette for a minute. For those of you that are around the Hartford area or in Middletown, you already know probably about Phil because he has been kind of active in Middletown and he has done some very interesting things. You're a businessman in Middletown. Tell me about your primary business.
It's Eli Cannon's Tap Room and Nora Cupcake Company.
Now, you know, we talk about the two different Connecticut's. Your end of Main Street didn't have the same kind of development that the other end. A lot of people who have been to Middletown in the last few years, they know that it's really picked itself up and that there's restaurants galore and all kinds of stuff going on. Not as much down where Eli Cannon's is.
No, it was very depressed, the area. Maybe that's why the space was always available. But when we went in, we had a different idea of what we were going to do right from the beginning, and it was a different paradigm. And I think that a difference maybe between boomers, and I'm a really young boomer. I'm the last, 64. And maybe millennials, is I see millennials opening up restaurants similar to mine, and what they want to do is open it, make it as good as they can, move to another town. Open up another one, move to another town, open another town. And our idea was we're going to open it up, make it as good as we can, and then make the neighborhood better, because that's the neighborhood that supported us. So what we did is we took Carrie, my general manager, and we said, okay, now you're going to open up a cupcake place, but it has to be across the street. It has to be in the same neighborhood. And because we helped her and partnered with her, she has 3 years to take one of her employees. They have to open up a business in the same neighborhood. You can't go anywhere else. We're not going to open up another Eli Cannon's in Avon or Farmington or whatever. Nora Cupcake is always going to be in Middletown, but we have to continue to help our employees that helped us.
So you you capitalized her business. She always wanted to bake. You not only capitalized her business, you pretty much threw her out the door of your restaurant because she wasn't going to leave.
Yeah, at the time...
She didn't want to take that risk.
I said, this will be awesome. You're a super baker. It's going to be fantastic. She said, the economy is super bad. I can't do it. I like my job here. She'd been with me for 15 years. She said, I think I'm just going to stay. Space across the street opened up. We said, listen, Carrie, the stars are aligned. It's right there. I'll partner with you. This way we'll be partners. You're not leaving here. I'll help you. It's going to be awesome. The economy. I said, okay. And I love my job here. And I'm secure here. And I said, okay, that's awesome. You're fired. Now you need a job. And I'll help you go get a job over there in your own cupcake place. And she did, and she's a tremendous success. It's fantastic.
And you made her promise that now in 3 years, if she's successful...
And 3 years is up on New Year's Eve. So she has to start the process on New Year's Eve that one of her employees has to open up a business in the same neighborhood of Nora.
It's fantastic. And by the way, for anybody who hasn't tasted her cupcakes, the truck comes to Hartford, and you can go to Middletown, and seriously, they are the best cupcakes ever. And I've tried a few all over the place, and they're the best ones ever. They're fabulous. And they're in the lobby as you're leaving, because Phil just likes to do that. He had to bring some stuff with him, because he doesn't go anywhere without the cupcakes. Because, in fact, he told me a good way to get your political leaders to listen to you is to drop cupcakes on them, right?
I never said that. What I said was that the wheels of the political machine are better greased with cupcakes than they are with anything else. And I found that whenever I was trying to get some zoning thing go through, it's cupcakes to the secretary before you meet with whoever you're going to meet, always, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt.
The cupcakes can't hurt. I want to talk to, do we have any of the folks here from Reset? I want to talk a little bit about social enterprise. Right behind me? There you are. Hey, Chris. Yeah, Chris, stand up, please, if you would.
Cupcakes is a benefit corporation too, isn't it?
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about social enterprise and what it is as a business and who's really getting into it.
So,
First, give us the definition.
Yeah, so I'm a member of Reset, which is the social enterprise trust over their offices around Pratt Street, and I've been working with them for a couple of years. And the way they define social enterprise is a business structure to solve a social and/or environmental problem. So the idea is that there's a business model behind it, but that business model and your revenue is really driving the social change that you want to see in communities, and specifically with Reset, it's here in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm. Have other businesses, more traditional businesses, do they take these businesses seriously?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, a really great example is J.P. Morgan Chase. They do a running survey of impact investing, and they foresee that within the next 5 to 10 years, that market will grow globally to be $1 trillion investment market. So I'd say that someone takes it seriously.
It's interesting, Chris, that what I've been hearing and reading and all is that a lot of millennials are very interested in when they go to work for a company, what does the company do besides what they produce? What do they care about? What do they put their money behind? And, you know, back in the day, you might not even have thought to ask that question. Plus, you probably couldn't have found out, whereas today...
We expect it. I know for myself, and I know for a lot of my friends, and a lot of the work I do with sort of organizing millennials in Connecticut is they will actually take a job that pays less so that it could, because it's a job that's more meaningful. They will move somewhere and take that job so that they can have an impact and they can feel like their job is more than just a paycheck. And I think that's one of the things that keeps me always inspired and really excited, makes me really excited to be a millennials, because I know that I'm part of a generation that will not accept less, and that you know, I think I don't know anybody who is active in the community that doesn't believe we can actually overcome some of the challenges that seem to have just pervaded cities like Hartford and just taken over and been here since, you know, at least since the 50s and 60s. At one point, Hartford was the wealthiest city in the country, and it'd be great to see it get there again.
Chris, there's been some discussion also about other states having taken a lead in social enterprise, that there are certain types of legislation that may be needed in order to help these businesses move forward. What would that involve?
Well, Connecticut actually has it. We have what's called the Benefit Corporation, and basically the Benefit Corporation is a legal status that you can elect here in Connecticut and I think 26 other states or more. And basically what it just means is you're still structured like a normal for-profit business, could be an S Corp or a C Corp, but really you make a public and actual legal commitment to the social impact that you want to have. You state it in your documents as a business, and every year you have to file an annual benefit report that is reviewed by a third-party standard and compared against it. And really the idea there is to not just say you have a social mission, but sort of prove that you have a social mission and be forced to demonstrate that year in and year out. And one of the really important things for that is that greenwashing is a serious problem. And
what do you mean by that term?
So greenwashing is a way of a business, particularly larger corporations, to sort of say, don't worry, you know, our product is really great, you know, because we give 1% or something away. And it kind of makes people feel a little bit good because, you know, we do feel really good when we are helping somebody out, but their impact is pretty minimal. If you have a company, for example, that's trying to monopolize the water supply in a developing country, but at the same time, don't worry, we're giving 1% away to, you know, for education or something. You know, it kind of just doesn't balance itself out.
I have to think that the first social enterprise company that I was really aware of was Paul Newman's company that said, you know, their motto was all profits to charity, and they have done that. They've given all their money away. Tom Allen, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit. You work for Senator Blumenthal, and apparently you have been interested in public service ever since your childhood.
Right. Yes. It's actually something that came to me really when I was in high school. I developed a keen interest, and I actually owe a lot to my teachers, and then to my professors at college. Dr. Matt Warshauer, who's here with us tonight, was one of my professors at Central Connecticut State University, and he was a great inspiration there. But a lot of it, I think, comes from the fact that, and won't know if I will speak to all millennials about this, but there's the sense that we're very aggressive about tackling the issues because we're tired of constantly reacting to everything. A lot of the concerns I get from all individuals from all generations is that we are a reactive nation, that we respond to issues only after a crisis happens, that it takes a disaster or some kind of catastrophe for people to decide to wake up and say, wow, we have to do something about this. And that's frustrating. And I think for millennials, particularly who are so familiar with technology and are aware of the other alternatives, the solutions, the possibilities that are out there, we're frustrated that the system, through whatever form, doesn't tap into these solutions, does not take advantage of these options and applies them to solve the problems today. So that's where you have a lot of individuals who start on their own organizations or get involved in groups or organizations that are outside the main system. And they take this active role and they run with it, because we're waiting to constantly react to problems. It's just not a solution. And as Chris has pointed out, we don't accept half measures. We don't settle for anything less than the answer.
Thank you. We could bring a microphone right over here to Professor Warschauer. I just want to find out about right here. Keep coming. How you inspired somebody like this and why? You're just a Gen Xer, aren't you? I mean, you're kind of ignored and yeah. Oh, your mic's not working. I'm going to hand you this.
Thanks, Dane. I fall in the valley between these two groups. I'm a Gen Xer, and we grew up being angry, and not necessarily believing in institutions either. With people like Tom in particular, it was really hard because he wasn't that good a student. And no, I'm just kidding. Tom is. I know. I can't go back and change his grades anymore. Tom was one of my great students, and I teach American history. My specialty is political and constitutional history, and I think it's great to hear that from Tom and from other students. I know I have a couple other students here, and to have seen them go out and do things that are working towards change. And I think that one of the things that I've heard from everybody here is their desire, this internal drive that they have to want to truly make a difference. And I think we always, because we all push ourselves and we wonder about, are we really making a difference? What is it that we're doing that is making a difference? And I've been teaching at CCSU for this is my 17th year. I had dark hair when I started, and I still, even with working with great students, I still personally myself wonder sometimes if I'm making a difference and if there's not more that I could do to make a difference. And I think what Susan Campbell said earlier, I think really matters. And one of the things, and that was that, to touch one person or two people or three people and watch them go out with that spark and go and do something, that's really what matters. And I find myself, one of the things I really worry about is whether history matters to our society any longer. And as an historian, it matters a great deal to me. And I always try and teach history, not just the sort of factoid history of isn't that nice to know, isn't that quaint, but rather that history it can be empowering, and that history should be learned for the impact that it has had on our society and what it tells us about who we are today. And that's always been my drive for history. So when I get people like Tom, who, I had Tom in a bunch of classes, in political history classes, and to talk about the history of our politics, and I know a good bit about it at this point, and I get very disconcerted. And again, I'll go back to Susan when she said, it's just a matter of political will. It's just a matter of political will. Well, I'm convinced, and I say to my students all the time, that I don't think as a people, as human beings, I don't think that there's a problem we're presented with that we can't in fact solve. So it ultimately always comes down to the matter of political will. And I get so frustrated with our political system right now, with our two mainstream political parties and how they dominate the conversation. And I don't know how we go beyond that. So I love to hear it. We just need the political will. But I really don't know. I don't have a sense of how we can get to the next step on that big picture level.
Will you hand the microphone to Alden? Let me get it for a minute just so they can hear me. You told me that you have run for office a couple times, even knowing that you were not going to win. Why do that?
Well, I think this whole discussion about political will, how do we get people involved, I think this is a crucial part. And I'll step back first and say that as a social media manager, one of the key things is we can be reaching out to get our message. We all have things that we're passionate about. We need to be reaching out where we're connecting with people, and these days a lot of those connections are on social media. Beyond that, running for office is a chance to get up and get your message out, even if you've got almost no chance of getting elected. I'm very involved with the Connecticut Health Foundation, very focused on health disparities. And so when people ask me about my campaign, I typically say that I won. I didn't get elected, but I won, because I got people thinking about health disparities. It was an opportunity to ask people to get involved. And I'll tie it back to what Denise Merrill said at the very beginning of why do people get involved? Because they get asked. And it's an opportunity, if you're running as a long shot, if you're fighting for a cause that seems hopeless, the least you can do is ask other people to join you. And you can do that with social media.
Thank you so much, Alden. Brandon Frame, where are you? You're standing right over there, sitting right over there. Let me see if I can get to you with the mic. I'm going to have to hand it to you because I can't get back there. Tell me a little bit about how you are civically engaged and how you're trying to change the world for some of the young black men and African American boys who live right here in our community and elsewhere.
Yes, I run an organization called The Black Man Can, and it operates here and in several communities across the country. I'm working on promoting a positive black male image. I'm actually being in New York City tomorrow doing stuff around Ferguson, Michael Brown, and everything that's taking place. And it's really just about, we do a lot around mentoring. We have a whole curriculum around positive self-identity, really just exposing them to what's possible out there in the different communities and whatnot. I also work at High School Inc. here in Hartford, Connecticut. Metro Hartford Alliance is a huge... High School Inc. is Hartford's Insurance and Finance Academy. So it's a school where students take business classes. So all our electives are business classes along with math, English, history, foreign language. All the major corporations here in Hartford, Travelers, Aetna, Prudential, are all major partners providing internships. We take the students abroad every single year. We're really showing them the opportunities that are available in careers of insurance and finance. And so, yeah, we just, really just trying to show students here in Hartford and everywhere just about opportunities that are available to them and what they can accomplish in the world.
Sounds very good. And I love the organization. Is there anybody here that hasn't had a chance to talk? Okay, do we have a microphone that we can bring back here? Rebecca, right over there. And I think mine is the other working microphone. Is your microphone working now too? Great.
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback off of what Tom Allen was saying earlier about how we really only respond to crisis, and that's a major problem, especially in the black community, as I see it. With the whole Ferguson situation, it was a tragic situation. But if you look at the makeup of the police force, you look at it was predominantly a white police force. But how active were the African Americans in terms of engaging politically? I look at it here when I look at my own hometown of Meriden. Meriden is 50% black and Hispanic, but we have one city councilor that's African American. We have 0 board of ed that's African American. And the political makeup it just reflects that throughout the town. So I think that part of it is also the education level too. I think that some of our people don't understand who governs them. When your mailbox breaks, you don't call it the White House, but everybody came out to vote for Obama in 2008. Yeah. So I think that's a major problem is education. Who actually governs you, and how does the political system work? And when you piggyback off of the history, you piggyback off of what is being taught in the school system. Common Core it's great. I mean, Common Core is being echoed, but our kids are not being taught how to think freely for themselves because everything is so STEM, Common Core. But where's the history? Where's the civics? Where's all the other things? I went to a high school in Meriden, and I asked. Randomly, I walked down the hallway and I asked 20 African Americans, what does the NAACP stand for? None of them could tell me what the acronym stood for. None of them.
And now you're the youngest president of the chapter.
Well, yeah, I'm one of the youngest in the country, but yes, well, yeah, and it was kind of sickening when you're looking at African Americans, and we're like, do you realize that if it wasn't for Brown versus Board of Ed, you wouldn't even be able to be in the school like you are today? But out of 20 random African Americans, nobody could tell me what the NAACP stood for. So I think that we have to readdress how are we teaching our kids, and what are they actually learning in school?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jason. There was someone over here who wanted to talk. Yes.
Oh, thanks. I'm Becky Coates. I'm with Occupy Hartford and a bunch of other groups.
Speak up a little bit, Becky.
I'm with Occupy Hartford and a bunch of other groups in Hartford, and just want to start by thanking all the boomers for really opening it up for the millennials to really go forward making change. Like, we grew up thinking like, yeah, obviously everyone's equal, like, duh. We were taught this by our parents, and so I think we're in a great place to start moving forward and start working on the change that's still around, the change that need to happen because of the inequality that's still around. But I just wanted to comment on millennials' methods versus boomers.
Please.
And we might not have like big sweeping movements. Like, we tried with Occupy to really have this big sweeping top-down reform kind of thing. But I think what's happening more, especially in the wake of Occupy, is a lot of smaller local initiatives popping up. I know, especially in Hartford, from Occupy Hartford, we have Activate CT, which is me and Deborah are part of, and we were big with getting GMO labeling in Connecticut. And there's Commonomics, which is we share ideas in sustainable living practices and alternative economies that are going on around the state already. And out of that was born the Manchester Area Sustainability Cooperative, which I'm a part of too. And we're focusing smaller and smaller and smaller on how to make local change in a grassroots way that can then be repeated throughout the country. So instead of trying to do a top-down approach, I think a lot of millennials are like, we don't trust the institutions. We want to do it ourselves. And one of the things is, instead of being revolutionary, we're trying to be solutionary and trying to find ways to make it work in our local communities. And one of the things I want to mention is there's a great organization that I'm a part of called Grand Aspirations. It's a national organization, and what they do is they set up little hubs around the country, and it's youth-based. It's all 30 or under, unless you're like a local initiative, and it's very repeatable. And that's, I feel, the way that millennials will be getting change, is not trying to end the war or change Wall Street at a huge top-down approach, but let's just start living a different type of life. I see that with a lot of people that instead of trying to get involved in the political arena, they just are walking away from it and living alternative lifestyles.
I think Deborah wanted to say something. Deborah, were you raising your hand?
My name's Deborah. I'm out of Occupy, most specifically Occupy Hartford. The one thing that I do want to say about Occupy in general is that so many people are saying Occupy is dead. It's gone the way of the dinosaur. As Becky mentioned, a lot of us now are doing things because Occupy gave us the skills, it gave us the determination. I know that it made me realize that I have a voice. So I am doing now many things in many different areas because my skills were built originally through Occupy, and I feel like I'm doing things now because I didn't do them. I'm a boomer, and I wasn't doing the things that I so desperately believe I should have been doing way back when. And it's time for a lot of us, I believe, to do now what we might not have done earlier.
And I think I'm going to let that be the last note of the night, because that sounds to me like someone who learned from millennials and brought some boomer issues and skills and expertise and life experience. And I think that's sort of where we're all going with this. The boomers are getting tired. They want to go home. Some of the seats are empty. The millennials want to go out clubbing. That's why some of the other seats are empty. So I think that we're going to wrap up this conversation, but hope that we will stay in touch and that we will continue to have this conversation. I'm hoping that you found some ways tonight to find a path to getting involved civically in many, many different ways that are available. And we hope that you'll continue the conversation with us here at the Old State House and at the Connecticut Network. And for Rules of Engagement, I'm Diane Smith. Good night.